What is up, NFL fans, and welcome back to another episode of The Way We See It. I'm Jeff Hartman, joined by Wesley Coleman. What's up, Wesley? How's it going?
It's good. We're about to start manufacturing things to talk about pretty soon, but it's going to be really interesting. It's going to be the best topics over the next 4 weeks.
We'll be back in training camp before you know it. It's seriously, it gets a lull, yes, but we'll be back there before you know it. We have a lot of NFL stuff to talk about. I want to bring up this situation first, which by the time this runs, I don't know if it'll be rectified. I'm going to guess no. What do you make of the Shemar Stewart Cincinnati Bengals situation? I honestly, first and foremost, let me be completely honest. I don't know what the Bengals are doing that he doesn't like. Do you know what the actual, is it verbiage in the contract? What is really going on?
Yeah, so basically every contract has wordings in it about if you do something that makes you ineligible in the contract, it just voids your guaranteed money for that year, where they're trying to add something in that it makes the entire rest of the contract void, I believe is what it is. Obviously his response in the locker room has gotten more of the publicity than whatever the Bengals offered or did to make him upset.
Well, is he playing his cards right, in your opinion? Because there are a lot of rookies out there that are waiting for guarantees or even signing bonuses, things that the teams can still maneuver around, because really there's a slotted wage scale for rookies, so we know that. He shows up to minicamp and then he leaves. In your opinion, Wesley, has Shemar Stewart played his cards to the best of his ability, or is he getting some bad advice?
So I think he was getting bad advice by being there without a contract where he was open to get interviewed and ask questions about it that he was not prepared to speak about.
Right.
And I think he should have not been there in the first place to answer those questions. Now that he answered the questions poorly, leaving looks bad. Yeah. I think they played it exactly wrong. And I'm not saying he should be sitting at camp not getting paid. He should have never been there if he wasn't prepared to speak eloquently or with knowledge or sounding like somebody who is blessed to be drafted in the first half of the first round. I
don't know. Rookies go through this stuff without contracts all the time. I mean, the Steelers, they had rookie minicamp. It was at the end of rookie minicamp where they got 6 out of 7 of their 2025 draft picks under contract. But they continued with Derek Hartman hadn't signed his deal yet, first-round pick. They have rookie minicamp. It's done, obviously. They go through phase 3 of OTAs. He still doesn't sign, but he signs before mandatory minicamp. I don't know if mandatory minicamp, he's probably thinking it's mandatory. I have to be here, but then again, he's not under contract. And so before we go further with Shemar Stewart, do you think the Bengals are in the same ilk screwing this up as well?
Yeah, I think so. Obviously, I think the Bengals trying to set a precedent with a new contract and then holding to it is pretty questionable. It also probably doesn't look bad or good that they're in this exact a contract dispute with another defensive lineman right now, Trey Hendrickson. People are going to pick sides, so it's a chance that they look bad there too. When you're trying to set a precedent for new verbiage in a contract that doesn't exist, you're not going to get that signed. And it's pretty questionable. And I think that some of the stuff, it's really vague as far as he could get suspended for hitting someone with the crown of his helmet and lose guaranteed money for all future years of the deal. Well, what kind of it's pretty weird, I think. Having said that, Shemar Stewart's we go back to all the way to before the draft. This is a guy that huge size, athletically gifted, off the charts numbers testing wise, and has basically produced nothing in his years at Texas A&M. It was something like 1.5 sacks or 2 sacks over 3 seasons or something. It was just
weird. It's weird.
Something that makes no sense. And so, if you got in with verbiage of off-season workouts and being in shape and learning the playbook or learning how to play football, I mean, yeah, I can get that. Showing up with some sort of weird angle and you hit somebody with the crown of your helmet and the NFL suspend. I don't know. Like it's weird on both sides. I think him getting drafted so high was weird because I think that people should be able to play the game of football and be on tape playing good football before getting drafted in the first round. But this is pretty interesting from both sides. I could see you making a case that both sides are doing a terrible job here.
And of course, it's Cincinnati, and they mess up a lot of crap. They're maybe not as bad as the Browns, but it's something in the water in Ohio. Let's that final question before we move on from this topic. Do you think Shemar Stewart gets a deal done before training camp, or do you think this is going to linger?
The only reason I would have thought that he'd for sure be getting a deal, the only thing is I think that some of the things he said the other day probably didn't sound good or look good. I don't know. I mean, like I think he's got all the way. He can be traded between now and August 5th, and he basically has to sign his deal by November 11th. I think something's going to happen by that time. The Cincinnati's not letting them go back and get nothing for their first round draft pick.
Right.
That's not happening. And like he's not going to file with the NCAA to go back to college, which there is a route where that's not impossible. It's highly unlikely, but I don't know. He's eventually going to want that millions of dollars that he's slotted to get, because if he went back in the draft, he's not getting drafted this high next year.
No.
Period.
No.
So it's less money next year, and the Bengals they want to improve their defense. They don't want to not have him. So I definitely think that something happens by August 5th.
Well, the last thing I'll say is you bring up the production, and now it didn't match. It didn't match the measurables that you're seeing. It didn't match the physique, all of it. Were there red flags on this guy coming out of Texas A&M? And when I say red flags, I'm not talking about, he doesn't do well. You mean the fact that he didn't
never sack the quarterback? Besides that?
No, not like, he's got a really good spin move, but he can't do the bull rush. Or not this, that. And I'm not talking about either, let's not go down the draft day, like, no one went to his birthday party. But, you look at someone like George Pickens. I use him as a great example. First-round talent, but he's got some issues. He fell to the second round, and that's when the Steelers took him coming out of Georgia. I don't know if Shemar Stewart had those type of red flags, because if he did, then shame on the Bengals for not adhering to some of those policies and thinking with your head. But you're saying he didn't have those red flags.
I wouldn't assume so, because there's so many red flags as far as the production numbers that if he had a red flag like that, that would have been, the 2 out of 3 are bad.
Yeah. Well, speaking of red flags production-wise, coming out of college, I know I was one that thought Anthony Richardson was huge red flags in terms of he didn't really start many games.
Man.
Horrible completion percentage at Florida. And everyone's like, but AR-16 is so good and he's so athletic. You talk about an organization that might be fumbling the issue a little bit. What's your takeaway on Anthony Richardson, who reportedly injured his shoulder again, going to be out until training camp? I feel like the Colts are just trying to find a way to get this guy off the payroll. What's your take on that? I talked with Kevin Smith on the Whip Round, Beto. I'd love to hear your take.
My take is if he was healthy, he would lose the quarterback competition to Daniel Jones.
That says something.
and I don't particularly think it would end up being very close.
I agree.
He can't stand still in a pocket and throw a football. Like, what are we talking about? He has had enough starts now to see what he can and can't do. And I mean, there's some dynamic athletic ability there, but it's not standing in a pocket and throwing a football.
Right.
I don't know if the Colts brass is really upset about this shoulder injury or is a sigh of relief of like, here's our way out of this.
I'm curious how he injured his shoulder again. I think this is
him and Derek Carr were playing golf together. Both of them using too big of a head on their driver. Both of them hurt their shoulder.
Yeah. Let me put on my tinfoil hat and say that sometimes I think injuries are kind of manufactured. And
he got a second opinion that says he just needs to rest. He doesn't need the surgery. Wait, what? So you're an NFL quarterback. You can either throw the football or you need surgery. Like, what is going on here? It's the offseason.
It's like when Deshaun Watson ruptured his Achilles a second time. What are you doing? Again, yeah, your face. For those that are listening, you don't see it. His face tells the story. You're like, that sounds kind of fishy to me. That sounds kind of fishy. So, all right, let's move on. I'm curious about some other takes here. I think this is going to be the future preseason. I'm going to get this out of the gate right away. I'm going to explain it. I think that when the NFL goes to 18 games, which is only a matter of time, they are going to say we're only doing one preseason contest. And so NFL teams are probably thinking, as a coach, how can I evaluate my team? How can I prepare a 53-man roster? That's assuming they still have 53 and they don't expand it, which they should. But that's neither here nor there. I think joint practices are going to be the new preseason for these teams. Now, I can say the Steelers are rumored to have a joint practice with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers when they come to Pittsburgh. Are the Saints having one this year with anyone?
Well, interesting enough, the Saints announced they were going to spend 9 to 10 days out with the Los Angeles Chargers.
Okay.
Great weather, all that kind of stuff. Definitely better than what the terrible weather in New Orleans and how hot it is there. So they're going to be able to get some. It was assumed probably like 3 or 4 joint practices in. They've announced they will be doing 0.
Oh.
It was like the weirdest thing of like. So
we just want to announce that we're doing nothing.
They have the opportunity to, and they have decided not to have joint practices with the Chargers.
What's your take on joint practices?
So I used to think that it's probably, in theory, I think it's the greatest idea there is find a team that's not on your schedule, that's potentially maybe not even on your schedule for, 2 years from now. A team that maybe has some of the coaches that your coaches and just kind of stuff like that. And so you get in there and you get some good work against an opponent that's not your own offense or defense. I think it's as good a plan on paper as there is. Execution-wise, I think it just doesn't work.
But it always ends up in a fight.
It always does.
It always ends up in Aaron Donald putting a helmet on the sideline and strapping up to go into a fight in the middle of the practice field.
It's these guys' first opportunity to clearly hit someone really hard.
Yeah.
And, earn their spot, make their name, show that they're not washed up, whatever it is. It's their first time to really do it completely unencumbered and not worried about like, oh, I hurt my teammate. And it doesn't work out. No. I don't know that it makes anybody better ever.
Now, the Steelers they did it with the Buffalo Bills last year. No one got to see it. It was at Acrisure Stadium the day or 2 days before camp had already released and all that stuff. And then they did it before 2020 with the Detroit Lions and the Bills again, and both ended up in skirmishes. And it's one of those things where a lot of coaches will say, these are better because you can set up specific situations, red zone offense versus red zone defense. Don't touch the quarterback. But it only takes one guy, like you said, I'm a third-string defensive end. I need to make a name for myself. And so they get a shot at a quarterback, and next thing you know, it's fisticuffs. And so I just think that it's, like you said, you hit the nail on the head. Great on paper. It makes a ton of sense.
It's perfect. It's the best idea.
But in execution, I don't know how it would be any different unless you said, okay, we're just going to do like 7-on-7 type stuff. We're only going to work with the skill position players. I mean, seriously, let's be resolution people here. What could be a better way to execute these joint practices?
Yeah, I just don't think that the defensive players are going to like that at all. Like the 7-on-7 so much in favor of the offense. And I mean, it's again, I think at that point it's smarter to have a preseason game there where you actually have officials and people being held accountable and people that are going to be cut from what they do there and all that kind of stuff. I think it's just...
Well, do you think what I suggested is going to happen, that the NFL is going to say we're going down to one preseason game? Or do you think they'll just keep moving it back and say we're still going to do 3, but we're starting a lot earlier?
I think it'll eventually be 2. I think that someday there's going to be 18 regular season games and 2 preseason games. And I think that's going to be horrible for the first 2 or 3 games of the season, of the regular season.
Absolutely.
It's just what it is. But then, you get a better opportunity when you get to 18 games. You have a better chance of being bad for your first two and still being okay.
Yeah.
So I think that kind of waters that down a little bit. But I think eventually the 18-2 is where we're going to end up landing. Who knows if any actual NFL quarterbacks play either one of those two preseason games ever.
Okay. Over under 5 years when the NFL goes to 18 games.
Oh, under. Yeah,
So they're gonna have to reopen up negotiations. Like the collective bargaining agreement is gonna have to be redone.
Isn't the correct collective bargaining through 2030?
2030 or 2031.
If it's 2031, then I'll say over because it's going to be that deadline that's going to make all this happen. But there's rumors about the NFL owners. There's a lockout that's going to happen before any of that.
So you're thinking the next CBA is going to end in a lockout?
This 50-50 split, the NFL owners, there's way too much money out there. The NFL owners are not okay with the players getting 50% of the money anymore. There's no way that's
a tough ask for the NFL owners to say, we don't like giving you 50%, but we do want you to play another game.
the NFL, well, that's a way for them to earn more, get it back. But the NFL owners can anytime afford to shut the NFL down for a year.
Sure.
The NFL players cannot.
And so they'll fold eventually. But there's going to have to be a give and take, I would feel, at some point. And so it's just, what are the owners going to give up?
I think the owners are going to offer them 43%, but if you get to add us the 18th game, we'll give you 47. I mean, that sounds like small things, but that's billions of dollars.
I was going to say 3% when you're talking about billions is a lot.
A couple of percent, it matters.
I don't want another lockout, man. That was awful. The last time that there was actually like an extended lockout, that was bad. I remember Drew Brees. He was on the committee. Yep. He's one of the main faces.
He was the head of the NFL Players Association.
That was 2010 when they finally ended that lockout, and then they signed a 10-year deal, and then we're in the second deal now. But there was no lockout the second time around. This is crazy. This is absolutely crazy, and this leads us to our next topic, which is that right now the Kansas City Chiefs. This has happened in a couple areas and cities, and whatever you want to call it, depending on which state you live in. There's a sense for, should the public pay for stadiums to be built? In other words, should they use taxpayer dollars to fund stadiums being built? I can say in Pittsburgh, they did use taxpayer dollars for both PNC Park and what was Heinz Field at the time, now Acrisure Stadium. Cleveland's going through this as they're trying to build their dome just on the outskirts of Cleveland. What do you think about this, Wesley? Do you think that taxpayer dollars, citizens, should be funding these projects, or should it come out of the owners' pockets?
I mean, so at least on the Kansas City deal, what they passed in Missouri was they authorized bonds for up to 50% of the cost of a new stadium. And the Chiefs right now, their stadium that they want to build is $1.15 billion.
Jeez.
So that's over $550 million of taxpayer money. Man, in general, my initial reaction is I hate this. These guys have the money. They make money. They're getting richer every year. The value of franchises is going up all the time. It seems like there'd be a way to pay back the city for some of that, or maybe if they need it up front or something. Having said that, I have in the last few years, I work in an industry and we partner with a professional sports team. It's a Major League Baseball team that is one of our partners, and we own properties together with them and have done deals with them. The city itself stepped in and did lots of things to grow business in the area and make that money back. And invest that into the city. So I've seen the other side of it. If it's not just money that goes into the owner's pockets, like it does move back around. And it does help the city. Again, I think that this is where the owners will have the option to take their business elsewhere and have somebody that will give them a stadium at some point. And you don't want them moving the stadium 40 miles away from your city. I mean, the fans will still show up.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But at some point, then you're just, building a second infrastructure of a town around that. So it's one of those really tough things. I've always hated it, but it's where now we've seen people move their stadiums or move their teams and all. And I don't like that. What about you? Where you at on who needs to pay for this?
Are you asking me as a citizen of the United States, or are you asking me as a football fan? Which one is it?
As a football fan who doesn't live in a city with a professional team.
There you go. Very good. Although I live in Maryland.
Yeah, but I can pay for it.
I live in Maryland. My state tax dollars could fund a new Baltimore Ravens
How
stadium.
about that? How about you paying for a Ravens stadium?
Oh,
You enjoying that?
Puke. Well, I will say this: as a football fan, you just want the product. Everyone complains about whose name is on the outside of the stadium. Everyone complains about the cost of tickets and stuff. But really, we just want the product to be there. I've lived through both the Pittsburgh Penguins and the Pittsburgh Pirates threatening to leave the city and say, we will go elsewhere. The Penguins were one deal away from being like a Kansas City hockey team until Mario Lemieux's his group came in and said, no, we'll buy it, we'll fund it, it's staying in Pittsburgh.
Right now, you're wishing the Pirates had left.
It's the oldest institution in Pittsburgh, man. But still, 1887. Anyways, I just think that, the Kansas City Chiefs, and I hate what happened in St. Louis, and I hate what has happened to the Raiders in numerous cities, L.A., Oakland, now they're in Vegas. I don't know. I guess for me, I'm a traditionalist. I like it when teams are just where they belong. The Chargers don't belong in L.A. They belong in San Diego, but there's something happened there. I don't know the logistics or the minutiae, so I can't comment. Do you know?
No, I mean, what I was going to say is I'm thinking about, like, we've got players making $40, $50, $60 million per season now. Like, if there was a way that contracts stayed more reasonable, like, then could the owners split that?
Right.
George Kittle, I think, came out this week and said we should get paid more. Old George Kittle just signed a $76 million contract.
Yeah.
Like,
hey, George, shut up.
yeah, like for real. So it's just tough when there is so much money that we see in these crazy contracts, and we see more and more of it. And honestly, at the end of it, it's the fans whose teams get worse because of the large contracts. Because you get a $60 million quarterback, you get a $30 million receiver, and you get a $40 million defensive end. Well, that's a large portion of your team is payroll, and the rest of them necessarily aren't going to be that good. So it just seemed like there's a way that the money shouldn't come from me and you,
No.
people like us.
And that's so okay. Let me talk as a citizen of the United States of America now. I am willing to give money if it is in some way, shape, or form going to benefit my life or my family's life, right? So if Maryland, as a state, says, well, Jeff, we're going to tax you. They do that a lot. And we're going to take your money and we're going to improve the roadways and the infrastructure. Hey, 2 thumbs up. Let's do that because that's going to help keep everything safe. Bridges are going to be safe, yada, yada, yada. But then all of a sudden, they start getting very, and I'm not trying to get political here, okay?
Please don't.
Just don't waste my money. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
Just don't waste my money. That's all I want is be fiscally responsible with the money that I'm being voluntold to give you. And so that's where it's like, I don't know if I lived in Kansas City and I owned a business near the stadium. Yes, I'll give my money to that project because if you move it out to the outskirts, like where Cleveland is trying to move their stadium, it's going to really hurt my business.
Yep.
And so that's where I get really torn, if I'm being honest, Wesley. I get really torn in this. And I've never been able to give a straight answer. People have asked me, Jeff, what do you think about this? And it's like, well, I'm not trying not to get political, but I can see both sides of it. I really can.
Yeah.
And you can because you are working with these teams.
And
so
I've gotten to see a lot more of it because I actually work with city members who negotiate these deals and have gotten a professional football team in the same city and a professional baseball team, and they're looking at a plan now to get a professional hockey team there in the next few years, and whether or not that's possible. So there's it's an interesting seeing the other side of it and knowing what kind of revenue actually does go back into the city for that.
Yeah. I mean, I'll be honest. The Washington Nationals ballpark that was built, they built it in Southeast DC. I don't know if you're familiar with DC.
I've been there.
Southeast DC, prior to the Nats Stadium going in, not so nice.
You wouldn't go
wanna
there.
go there.
It's
But
really nice now.
exactly. So they go in and there's some gentrification happening where the people that are living
Major.
there, oh, you can't pay your rent now. You got to go somewhere else, which sucks. But now, like that area is really, really nice. And so that surrounding infrastructure has improved tremendously. So I do see that side of it. I don't want to come off as
Yep.
being like a stick in the mud or an old man shaking his fist at clouds. But at the same time, it's tough. It is tough. And you talk about what was the cost of the Kansas City Stadium? How many billion?
1.15 billion, which is actually in the realm of new stadiums. Not
I know.
as
Wasn't
high as
Buffalo
some.
way more than that? The stadium
Yeah.
that they're building?
Well, yeah, and I think the one in LA was like 3 billion, but we figured out why that is. That's because of like it costs money to get stamps on paperwork and all that. It's
That's
ridiculous.
California business right there, man. But still, it's
And
interesting.
The Superdome's 60 years old. It's doing just fine.
Is it 60 years old?
So it's something crazy, but they've rebuilt it, or they've remodeled it over and over again. And they're in the middle of another remodel right now before the next Super Bowl there.
You going to any games this year?
Oh yeah.
What do
Going
you
to-
have? Do you know which games, or are you still waiting?
Yeah, I'll be at the opener. I'll be at the Halloween almost time game against the Tampa Bay. I'll go to a game in December 21st. There's a game against.
Are these all home games in New Orleans, or are you going to some road games?
It's against the Jets, and then I plan on going to the game in Miami as well.
Ah,
It's the
Nice little
Dolphins.
vacation. Nice little
Yeah,
vacation.
it's Thanksgiving.
Oh,
It's been
that's
Thanksgiving
cool.
in Miami.
So let me ask too before we call it a show. What was your takeaway on mandatory minicamp for New Orleans?
It's good, man. They just a lot of information. Of watching Tyler Shuck and Spencer Rattler both play quarterback. They took 100% of the snaps at quarterback, which as it should be. They took about 50% each. Both of them looked really good. Tyler Shuck looked good for his first mini camp for a second round rookie, and then Spencer Rattler clearly showed he has made some growth since last year. And I think that something that was a big worry on the team the last few years, which is our offensive line, is set to be a major strength of our team going into this year, which can help our quarterback. And I think that we could see a lot from a development of a young quarterback and still get the first pick in the draft.
Hey, there can be some upside there. There can be some.
What about
upside
you?
there.
How does Mr. Rogers
Oh.
look? Tell you what, y'all are going to be a heck of a story this year.
Hey, people ask me. My buddy who's a Dolphins fan, he goes, "This is going to be a freaking train wreck." And I said, "It's going to be must-watch TV either way. Either it's going to look really good, and Aaron Rodgers is going to prove some doubters wrong, or it's going to be just like the New York Jets, Aaron Rodgers, and it's going to be a train wreck." So I thought that he answered the questions well. He did no team drills. Mike Tomlin told him specifically just do individual work. So there was not much to glean from there.
Did y'all sign Randall Cobb and Mercedes Lewis yet?
No, Mercedes Lewis is actually still in the league. He's on someone's roster, actually. So the trade is probably pending. But no, Randall Cobb is not. Everyone's talking about Allen.
Is Mark Shamura playing for? I guess that's a Favre tight end.
That was an old name, man. That was an old name. But he answered all the questions well. I honestly, I was most impressed with Derek Hartman. That dude is a monster of a man. And he's just hitting sleds. But I'll tell you what, they're already saying he's going to be starting left defensive end. And I was like, that says something because the Steelers don't do that. They don't announce rookies as starters. So we'll see, man. I'm excited for the Steelers to report to camp on July 24th. Do the Saints still go to West Virginia?
They've picked different places. I think this year I don't think they're going to Greenbrier. They've done Greenbrier.
Yeah, so I know they've been to Greenbrier, White Sulphur Springs.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I don't know that I know they're spending the 10 days out in California, which is smart. They need
You know
to do
what
that.
they're not doing? They're not doing a joint practice.
Not doing a joint practice.
All right, man. This has been a good show. Why don't you tell everyone where they can find you on social media?
You can find me on X at HoodatWesley13. I spar with Jeff on all things golf
Yes.
and football and I don't know. I think we got to talk about some professional wrestling or something.
Life.
Soon, I guess.
He just throws jabs at my life
and that.
constantly.
Jeff, where can we find you in your ayahuasca trip coverage?
Yes, my dark retreat coverage is at Jeff. If you find me on Twitter, just search Jeff Hartman. We're at J Hartman, HARTMAN_PIT. For our Steelers coverage, go to the Steel Curtain Network and steelcurtainnetwork.com. Wesley, until next week, man, take it easy.
See you next week.